For decades, Olivia De Havilland was known as Hollywood's angel, elegant, calm, and untouchable. But behind the flawless smile and the gentle voice was a woman who defied everything that Hollywood expected of her. She fought studios, outlived her enemies, and carried secrets that only surfaced when she was old enough not to care what anyone thought. From her brutal feud with her sister to her forbidden love affairs and her final battle at 101 years old against the very industry that once made her a star. The truth about Olivia De Havilland is not what people imagined. What began as a fairy tale of fame and beauty became one of the most shocking stories in Hollywood history. The girl who left home and never looked back. Olivia De Havilland was born on July 1, 1916 in Tokyo, Japan, an unlikely beginning for the woman who would one day bring Hollywood to its knees. Her British parents, Walter and Lillian, had moved there for work. Walter was a professor and patent attorney, and Lillian a former actress who had given up the stage for marriage. Their life looked comfortable from the outside, but behind the doors of their Western-style house in Tokyo, the marriage was disintegrating. Walter was rumored to be unfaithful, and Lillian, isolated in a foreign country, felt trapped. When Olivia was just 3 years old, her mother made a bold and irreversible decision. Gathering her daughters, Olivia and her 1-year-old sister Joan, she boarded a ship to San Francisco and left her husband behind forever. The family settled in California in 1919, a world away from the polite traditions of Tokyo. Lillian hoped the fresh air of Saratoga, a quiet town south of San Francisco, would heal Joan's fragile health. She began teaching drama to make ends meet, transforming their small home into a makeshift classroom. It was there that Olivia first saw the power of acting. She would watch her mother teach students how to project their voices, how to feel emotion, and how to find truth in performance. Lillian's lessons became Olivia's earliest education in storytelling, one that would define her destiny. But the peace was short-lived. When Lillian remarried in 1924, her new husband, George Fontaine, turned the household into a prison. Strict, cold, and controlling, he imposed endless rules. The girls were forbidden to have friends, join school clubs, or act in plays. He demanded absolute obedience and believed acting was sinful. Olivia, headstrong and idealistic, refused to be silenced. Her rebellion began on the stage of Los Gatos High School, where she performed in Alice in Wonderland and The Merchant of Venice. She was only a teenager, but audiences already saw something luminous in her presence, a natural grace that couldn't be taught. The conflict at home escalated until Fontaine gave her an ultimatum: quit acting or leave forever. Olivia chose freedom. At 16, she packed her belongings and walked out of the house, leaving behind her mother's protection, her stepfather's tyranny, and her sister's jealousy. She moved in with friends and began working in local theater productions, driven by pure determination. It was a dangerous gamble for a girl barely out of school, but she never doubted her choice. Then fate intervened. In 1933, at 18, she was cast as an understudy for A Midsummer Night's Dream under the legendary director Max Reinhardt. Just days before the premiere, both the lead actress and her understudy dropped out. Olivia was thrust onto the stage before thousands. She performed with such confidence and emotional precision that Reinhardt was stunned. He took her under his wing and soon after brought her to Hollywood to appear in Warner Brothers' film adaptation. In 1935, she signed a 7-year contract for $200 a week, a fortune for a teenager. Her debut performance was elegant, but her breakout came later that same year, when she was paired with a charismatic Australian newcomer named Errol Flynn in Captain Blood. Their chemistry was undeniable. The movie became a sensation, and Olivia De Havilland, once a runaway teenager, became one of the brightest young stars in America. But fame came with chains. For every smile on the red carpet, there was a clause in her contract that bound her tighter to Warner Brothers. She was adored by millions, yet trapped by the same system that had made her famous. Every role was written to please others: the gentle girl, the loyal love interest, the woman who never spoke too loudly. She longed for complexity, for truth, for independence. She didn't know it yet, but the same fire that had made her leave home would soon lead her to fight Hollywood itself, and win. The lawsuit that shook Hollywood. By 1943, Olivia De Havilland had been working under Warner Brothers for 7 long, exhausting years. Her contract, signed in 1936, when she was barely 20, should have ended. But Warner Brothers had other plans. They claimed she still owed them time because of the suspensions they had placed on her whenever she refused a role. Under the studio system, actors didn't just work for studios. They belonged to them. Everything from what they wore to who they spoke to was tightly controlled. If an actor declined a role, no matter how poorly written or demeaning, the studio could suspend them without pay and add those weeks to the end of their contract. It was a rigged system that kept performers in permanent servitude, too afraid to rebel. But Olivia wasn't like everyone else. She had already walked away from home at 16 rather than surrender her independence, and she wasn't about to surrender it now. In August 1943, at the height of her fame, she took a step no one in Hollywood had dared to take before. She sued Warner Brothers. Her case was filed under California Labor Code Section 2855, a little-known statute that stated no contract for personal services could last longer than 7 years. On paper, it looked simple. In practice, it was revolutionary. Hollywood erupted in disbelief. No one challenged the studios and survived. Jack Warner, the ruthless head of Warner Brothers, called her a silly little girl and ungrateful. Studio lawyers launched a smear campaign, painting her as a diva. Reporters ridiculed her for biting the hand that fed her, and many of her peers, fearing for their own careers, distanced themselves completely. Olivia was blacklisted. For nearly 2 years, she couldn't get a single acting job, but she refused to bend. While the case dragged through the courts, she lived off her savings, visiting military hospitals and volunteering to entertain wounded soldiers during World War II. "Everyone told me I'd lose," she later said, "but I knew I was right. I had read the law. On December 8, 1944, history was made. The California Court of Appeal ruled in her favor, stating that 7 years meant 7 calendar years, not 7 years of active service manipulated by studio suspensions. The ruling became known as the De Havilland Law, and it forever changed the power dynamics of Hollywood. From that day forward, no studio could legally hold an actor beyond 7 years. It was the end of the old studio system, the beginning of freedom for every artist who followed. The victory came at a tremendous cost. Olivia had spent over $13,000 on legal fees, a fortune then, lost nearly all her professional connections, and endured months of public humiliation. Yet she never regretted it. "I was no rebel," she said later. "I simply wanted to live in a world governed by law, not by tyranny." Her comeback was nothing short of poetic justice. In 1946, she returned to the screen with To Each His Own, playing a woman whose life was marked by heartbreak and sacrifice, a story that mirrored her own struggles. The performance won her an Academy Award for Best Actress. 3 years later, she won again for The Heiress, proving that courage and integrity could indeed triumph over fear and control. The Sister. She could never forgive. Olivia De Havilland's most painful and enduring battle wasn't with a studio executive or a Hollywood rival. It was with her own sister, Joan Fontaine. Born just 15 months apart, the two were bound by blood but divided by competition. Their mother, Lillian, never realized how much her comparisons would scar them both. "Olivia was the beautiful one. Joan was the clever one," she would say. What began as sibling rivalry slowly hardened into a lifelong war. From childhood, their relationship was turbulent. When their parents divorced, Olivia and Joan clung to their mother, who raised them under strict discipline. Olivia was the obedient daughter, eager to please, while Joan was rebellious and defiant. Their stepfather, George Fontaine, only made things worse. He was cold, controlling, and quick to criticize. Joan resented that Olivia, being older, always seemed to have the upper hand. Even as children, their fights could turn physical. Once, Olivia reportedly pushed Joan into a swimming pool, breaking her collarbone. Joan never forgot it. Both sisters dreamed of becoming actresses, and both inherited their mother's stage talent. But when Joan decided to pursue acting professionally, their mother interfered again. To avoid competition with Olivia, she demanded that Joan take a different surname. Thus, Joan Fontaine was born, a name that would one day rival her sisters on marquees across the world. But for Joan, it felt like exile. "I had lost not just my name, but my place in the family," she later wrote. Hollywood magnified every wound between them. Olivia's career took off first, with Captain Blood and Gone with the Wind, making her an international star. Joan, meanwhile, struggled in her shadow until Alfred Hitchcock cast her in Rebecca and Suspicion. The latter earned her an Academy Award and ignited the feud that would become legendary. In 1942, both sisters were nominated for Best Actress, Olivia for Hold Back the Dawn, Joan for Suspicion. On Oscar night, when Joan's name was announced, Olivia rose to congratulate her. In front of the cameras, Joan turned away. Some say Olivia refused to shake her hand. Others swear Joan snubbed her first. Whatever the truth, the moment became Hollywood history, a symbol of a sisterhood shattered by envy. 5 years later, the tension exploded again. When Olivia won her own Oscar for To Each His Own, Joan approached her with a forced smile. This time, Olivia looked straight ahead and passed her sister without acknowledgement. Photographers caught the moment, and the headlines read, "The War of the Sisters." Their relationship never recovered. In 1975, their mother Lillian died, and tragedy only deepened the divide. Joan claimed Olivia had deliberately kept her in the dark about the funeral, calling it an act of cruelty. Olivia denied it, dismissing the accusation as a tragedy of imagination. After that, they stopped speaking entirely. Decades of silence followed. No reconciliation, no forgiveness, only bitterness. In interviews, Joan couldn't resist a jab. "I married first, won the Oscar before Olivia did, and if I die first, she'll be furious that I beat her to it," she once quipped. It was cruel, but true to their dynamic. Even in old age, their rivalry defined them. Olivia, for her part, maintained a calm facade. "On my part, it was always loving," she told the Associated Press in 2016, "but sometimes estranged and later severed." The love she lost. Olivia's public image was serene, but her love life was filled with heartbreak. She dated Jimmy Stewart in the late 1930s. He even took her to the Gone with the Wind premiere in 1939, but she turned down his proposal, doubting he was ready for marriage. When he later starred in It's a Wonderful Life, she refused the role of Mary Bailey simply because acting opposite her ex would have been too painful. Then came Errol Flynn. Their chemistry on screen was undeniable, but off-screen, it was complicated. She confessed years later that she had been deeply attracted to him, and he to her, but he was married to actress Lily Damita. Flynn once declared his love at a London ball in 1937, but Olivia refused to be the other woman. He never forgot her. After his death in 1959, she said softly, "What I felt for Errol was not a trivial matter. I still feel close to him even now." Her marriage to writer Marcus Goodrich in 1946 seemed hopeful until it turned violent. His temper was uncontrollable. Once, he threw a pie across the room in rage. Olivia endured years of emotional abuse before finally divorcing him in 1953 to protect herself and their son, Benjamin. 2 years later, she married Pierre Galante, editor of Paris Match, and moved to France, where she would spend the rest of her life. In 1956, she gave birth to her daughter, Giselle, and seemed to find peace until tragedy struck again. Benjamin, her beloved son, was diagnosed with cancer and died in 1991 at 41. "It was the most terrible thing that ever happened to me," she said quietly. After that, Olivia withdrew further from the world, guarding her memories like fragile glass. The woman who sued Hollywood twice. Even in old age, Olivia De Havilland never stopped fighting. In 2017, at 101 years old, she stunned the world by suing FX Networks and Ryan Murphy Productions over the series Feud, Bet and Joan. Catherine Zeta-Jones had portrayed her as a gossip who called her sister a bitch. Olivia was furious. "They used my identity without my consent," she wrote to The Guardian, "and put false words in my mouth." She took the case to court, arguing that no studio had the right to exploit a person's name or likeness without permission. FX defended itself, claiming free speech protection for dramatized works. The case went all the way to the California Court of Appeal, and finally to the U.S. Supreme Court, which declined to hear it. She lost. Yet her determination inspired global admiration. "When one person's rights can be trampled on this way," she warned, "the rights of others who are more vulnerable can be abused as well." It wasn't the first time she had changed Hollywood law, but it would be the last. By then, she was living quietly in Paris, in a 19th-century chateau filled with memories surrounded by portraits, awards, and silence. In 2017, she became the oldest person ever named a Dame Commander by Queen Elizabeth II. A year later, she was still answering letters from fans, sometimes in perfect French. On July 26, 2020, just weeks after her 104th birthday, Olivia De Havilland died peacefully in her sleep. With her passing, the final link to Hollywood's golden age was broken. She was not the delicate angel Hollywood wanted her to be. She was stronger, sharper, and far more human, a woman who fought giants and won. Olivia De Havilland's life was not defined by glamour but by courage. She taught every actor who came after her that silence is not dignity, it's surrender. Which part of Olivia's story shocked you the most? Her war against the studios, her feud with her sister, or her final lawsuit at 101? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true stories from Hollywood's hidden past.